My name is Tarek Funk, and I'm from here. I'm a hip hop artist, funk artist. I've been making hip hop music for about 20 years now, since 2004, and everything that I make is very much political and is liberation music, Free Palestine, ACAB, all day. Everything that I do is influenced by black music, anything from jazz to hip hop. I would say some of my biggest influences are jazz musicians like Thelonious Monk, John Coltrane, Dizzy Gillespie, Dexter Gordon. As a MC, as a hip hop artist, I'm a huge fan of Black Thought and the Soulquarians and that early 2000s, conscious hip hop that was being produced, but maybe with more of a dead prez political edge. Yeah. I wish I could just make music that was just music for fun. But because of just the things that we know about the world and seeing it and maybe my identity, my mom is Palestinian, my dad's Syrian. I grew up in Damascus. It's hard to make anything else. I really wish I could just make funky, fun music. I would just make get down music and just be wearing bell bottoms all day. That'd be so cool. But no, I can't. I gotta speak on the darker things, unfortunately. But I try to sneak it in past people by making the music, the soundscape be a little funky and Afrobeat influenced and bouncy and all those things. And then yet, if you listen closely to what I'm saying, it's a very different picture. I didn't rap first. I started rapping when I was in grade 11. I've been playing music since grade 9, basically playing jazz music. And that had informed my entire style, to be honest. I was just always doing saxophone solos through the rhythm of rapping. And, a lot of people would say that is actually the continuation of the jazz tradition. It's kind of just switched over to using those same kind of improv drum solos or just the different rhythms. If you listen close to rapping, it's a lot of the same kind of runs as bebop, Mm-hmm. Generally, my style has been always influenced by funky MCs, very expressive MCs, Redman and Farside and people like that. They use a lot of more music in their rapping as opposed to someone more like MF Doom, who's a little more kind of monotone flow that works really cool for them. But my style's a little bit more musical. I was a jazz snob for many years. For 5 years, I only listened to jazz music. So it seeped in, and I'd say that connection is super important. I personally like the way that music can kind of be an anthropology of different moments just being passed down and people kind of passing the cultural moment down to the next generation who observes it and shifts it a little bit into their current context, right? And that's kind of what hip hop did with jazz samples and hopefully what we can kind of continue to do, because I love the fact that music, you can kind of access something that people have been doing for 100 or more years,
What is something you love about being a musician in Hamilton?
Musicians and MCs here have a bit of a hungry attitude about it because they know they really have an uphill battle to get some kind of mainstream recognition, at least. So they're very eager. There's always new blood and new people trying to get into it, and very ambitious people, which I love. Sometimes we think nothing else happens in the same way outside of Hamilton, but I'd say it's the same story everywhere. And that story is that the cost of doing business, for a number of reasons, you could kind of call it gentrification, you could call it just greedy landlords or housing crisis, whatever you want to call it. The cost has just gone up, and people are passing it down to the bottom person who's the ticket buyer, the person who's coming to see the show, spend money on a couple of drinks. So over 10 years of playing music, I would say it started in 2012 maybe. Seeing the cost of living go up for people, and specifically around housing, leaves them with less disposable income to spend at shows, right? So less people are coming out primarily because of that. I think that's the biggest part. Maybe people's priorities are shifted in terms of how they spend their money, is to try to get big ticket concerts more than to try to see local stuff, which fair enough. If your favorite pop stars coming through, you kind of want to save up if that's what you can have the choice between seeing a local that you'd kind of testing out or trying something new versus something you're sure about, right? So I get it. But it is harder to maintain a cultural element or any sort of real scene in grassroots scene when art is this sort of commodity of creating profit. I think at one point Hamilton used to be cheap enough that the people throwing the shows weren't making a lot of money. The people hosting the shows weren't making a lot of money, but also their rents for the businesses weren't as high as maybe where they are now, right? So there was a little bit more of a lower barrier to entry, so to speak, right? Like a band has to rent a venue now, whereas maybe they didn't in the past. 10 years ago, they didn't have to. I don't know when it started really. Maybe I'd say 2019 onwards, pandemic onwards, it started becoming like this standard that you have to rent a venue, which pretty much that's the funds that you're going to pay the bands with for, you know. So that's a challenge for me. So I often end up playing as a solo artist because of that, as opposed to hiring my bandmates to play who are like, you know, session musicians who pay rent through music. I often have to wait for like a, you know, a guaranteed check kind of thing, getting a contract, as opposed to what creates a music scene and like a thriving scene is when people are willing to take risks. And the risks come when the, you know, when there's not $500 that you just put out, or 400 put out to rent this space that's on the line, plus paying the band on top of that, right? So yeah, that's sort of my frustration with Hamilton. But that's not Hamilton exclusive. I think it's everywhere, and it's just the corporatization of grassroots art, and I'm sure it happens in other mediums as well outside of just music.
What are some of the venues that you've played before that you were sad to see go?
Okay, the first one that was really like broke my heart was Pepper Jack's Cafe back in the day. It became Absinthe, and then it closed down again a second time. Again, there was Homegrown Hamilton. That was a really cool spot. Baltimore House closed down. That was another cool spot. The nail on the coffin for me was This Ain't Hollywood. That was kind of when I felt like the people that were willing to take risks most on local artists and really like do a grassroots thing couldn't keep it going anymore, or maybe for whatever reason they had to shut down. So that one was really tough. And I thought it was interesting at the same time, like while all that was happening, is that people were trying to accommodate for what was lost by creating all these do-it-yourself spaces, or spaces that wouldn't normally be a venue that just convert to a venue. So I played some really cool shows out of, you know, out of spaces that are not really meant for that kind of thing. We played a garage once, like an auto shop once, plant shop I played once. That was really cool, like a flower shop, right? And restaurants definitely hold a lot of DJs and like small jazz things. So there is, I guess, like a silver lining, isn't that it made people be a little more creative with some of their spaces and create new spaces and venues to play. But I miss when there was that like sort of built-in infrastructure. Casbah had to close down even, right? So it feels like a city that's slowly shrinking in terms of its cultural like assets and so on. It's just the barrier to entry is higher now. I don't think it's impossible per se to make a living out of being an independent artist or to even create a scene, but you kind of have to have a little bit of money to come forward, right? Which a lot of these, you know, 20, 21-year-old guys don't got that, and they're just barely trying to make a living as is, right? So on top of that, having a buffer to spend on your music is pretty tough. But again, that might have always been the case, right? Like it's always been that artists are broke and that society does not value art that much. Really, it enjoys it, it loves it, but it doesn't place, you know, real financial value on it, or reward people for it fairly, I'd say.
What do you think the role of an artist is?
I mean, if you had asked me 10 years ago, I would have give you some super fist up in the air kind of answer. Like, you got to represent super hard. And especially like, you know, at least at one point in your entire catalog, you got to try to write something that reflects real life. But I think at this point, the role of an artist is just to be genuine and like authentic to who they are. And if they do that, then like that cuts out half the problem of all the garbage music out there and all this stuff, whatever it is. Like, just be super real and put in work, you know, put in the time to really perfect your craft.
How do you, as an artist, maintain an honesty with yourself when the world is calling for you to go with the Joneses and talk about stuff that doesn't matter to you?
Honestly, I have a hard time answering that because I don't have that struggle of like I gotta make this kind of music. It's just kind of whatever it is. It is whatever comes up comes out kind of. That and I've got there a long time ago. I think I'm an old man, but time heals a lot of your insecurities and things like that. So for me, it was never really about what other people thought, and it was more something that I had to do. So it's not that difficult to just accept that that's who I am. I'm a political artist. And maybe that's why, is because I've kind of known for a long time that this stuff is not marketable on a larger scale than people who may have like direct interest in conscious, political, angry kind of vibes,
What does your imagined future look like for artists who just kind of want to survive doing what they do?
Wow. Honestly, like the bottom line is that like people need shelter and people need food, and then the rest they can just find their passions based on that. So maybe we're moving towards a moment like a great reset, a societal reset where people's basic needs are gonna not be like so hard to get in a world that is this technologically and resource advanced, right? And in that world, like I think a lot of people would choose to be artists. Period. And there's so many people that had to go and become just straight to feed your kids, kind of just go straight to work. That could come out and make even more cool expression and more art. So yeah, no, I think as humans we just all want to play and have fun and be creative, and all this survival stuff is extra stuff that gets in the way of that. That's my philosophy: is just make music and art and play sports and do whatever it is that's your passion, right? Like so, that's my ideal world: is a place where our basic needs are met and people can move forward and make music.
Do you think it takes courage to be an artist?
Absolutely, yeah, no, absolutely. You have to be okay with like people seeing who you are, that vulnerable kind of authentic thing, and maybe that's why some people are not showing who they are exactly, right? Like it's a lot to showcase yourself in that front. I myself have like a limit to how much of that I'm willing to put out in terms of like the vulnerability of it, but I push that boundary, especially around a lot of this Palestine stuff that I've been writing about in the last few years, or in the last 2 years of genocide that's been happening to Palestine. There was a lot of music that I'd made about this stuff before that I didn't want to release at all because it was just so angry and so much like rage about this situation, right? So eventually, like I was able to focus that energy enough to make something coherent and put it out, but it is hard to like kind of put your soul out there and be like, hey, check it out. This is what I think.
What is your hope for the music scene in Hamilton?
I think the biggest thing that needs to change for Hamilton specifically is rents have to be somehow capped or affordable so that not more people have to shut down, or the kind of operations that do open up are catering to people that are, working class folks, because you need the working class folks to come into your business for it to create like a actual scene with real community, and not just people that are commuter coming in spending a couple $100 on fancy stuff. Ancaster people, I see you. So yeah, you need to basically like not be profit driven as a city. And if you did, the irony is that that's where the profit can be created, is when you actually like don't think about profit. That's when you have a really cool place where artists come out and the culture just happens because people have the capacity to afford doing stuff like that. And it's usually the gritty people that are making the most interesting stuff, right? Like not seeing a lot of cool stuff coming out of Ancaster. Not anymore. It's been a while.
Okay. All right. Well, is there anything else that you'd like to add? We got 4 minutes left in this.
Just that I got a lot of love for Hamilton. Got a lot of love for Toronto. I'm not a townie. I'm not like one of those like Toronto kind of guys. Like nah, it's all fake. It's all borders made up anyways. And that being an artist is like in a lot of ways just making art in general in this world that's like this crazy and this intense to survive in. It's a gift, right? And it's a privilege. And even though I'm complaining about like the city and how hard it is to be like an artist and make it, you got to rent the space and do all of this stuff. We're not getting bombed. We're got food. Things are good. and this is like a blessing, really, to have this blip in time where you get to make art and connect with people. It's beautiful. So more than anything, I'm grateful for music.